Hi guys, Charles here, welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking chromaticism and outside notes, and we're going to look at a very specific way to do that, which is hybrid scales. So first of all, what is a hybrid scale? Well, hybrid means a thing made by combining two or more different elements, a mixture, and a scale is any graduated sequence of notes, tones or intervals dividing an octave. Those are both dictionary definitions. So a hybrid scale, it follows, would be created by combining any two or more scales together. Hybrid scales often don't have their own name because they are a hybrid of two other known scales. What we intend to conclude from today's lesson is that the concept, the intent, the delivery, the rhythm, the articulation, and many other components of a melodic phrase are of utmost importance. The specific notes themselves, players have shown us for at least decades now, if not centuries, that the precise note required to create a beautiful melody over a certain chord is not always set in stone. We also are going to conclude that chromatic approaches are always great in practice. The George Garzoni random triadic approach is a great example of this. But they are less helpful in performance as they can require excessive CPU, your brain processing power. They can take you out of the moment. So what's the objective here then? Well, the objective of any chromatic approach should be to develop the ear, to freely hear the effect of all available 12-note options over any chord, so that when you are in a live setting and you're chilled out and you're not thinking about anything in particular, these sounds have a chance of coming through in your playing organically, which sounds so much less contrived and it sounds very natural. We've heard this from the great tenor sax players, or great sax players of all type, piano players, and of course guitarists like Alan Holdsworth, who seem to play any note over any chord. So why should we use hybrid scales? Well, the limitation provides a comfortable framework to experiment with chromaticism. If we say to a student, just play any note you like over any chord, that's too broad and it's very scary. It's worth remembering that even as a beginner, just playing the right scale over the right chord, for example, a major scale over a major chord, often didn't sound great. So to add in all the remaining notes, sometimes as many as 5 extra notes, is just a recipe for disaster. So hybrid scales give us a few additional options that we can experiment in a controlled and feels like a safe environment to experiment with those. Because we know that each scale that we use to build the hybrid works over the chord, it gives us a sense of confidence to really believe that, well, these notes must work. I must experiment further and try my best to create some interesting sounds here. Again, just like when you first start using the correct scales, it takes time to learn how to use that sound in a musical way, how to create melodies from that, rather than just running through the sound. These hybrid scales are going to train your ear to really recognise the individual intervals and tones within the chromatic scale, so that you're going to be better placed in future if you want to play a flat 6 or a flat 7 or a raised 4th, whatever it is. You'll hear it in your head before you play it and you'll know how to execute that. This, of course, can give us some lovely musical colours that perhaps we wouldn't have come across otherwise. By all means, these hybrid scales can also be used to create harmonies, so you can use these as a compositional device as well. It's also worth noticing that just like the bebop scale adds an 8th note in order to make the scale resolve each bar, different numbers of notes are going to imply different rhythmic groupings that are just going to happen naturally in your playing. So the method we're going to be following today, step 1, we choose 2 or more scales known to work over the current chord. We combine the chosen scales. Any unique note within each scale gets all bundled into one octave. We're going to spend some time getting comfortable with that new hybrid scale. We're then going to analyse the hybrid scale and look for any other scales that live within it, or any unique cells and shapes that we recognise. And finally, we're going to look for anything that's almost in that hybrid scale, by which we mean, let's say you see a scale in there, but you notice, oh, actually, that's only 6 notes of that scale. The 7th note is missing. Well, you're going to try adding the 7th note and see if it still works. So a couple of disclaimers here. It's silly to lock yourself into one specific scale over one specific chord. That's not a natural way to play. In the demonstrations I'm going to be doing in this video, I occasionally add in a note that I wasn't intending to play. Now, it would have taken me all day to sit down and play each demonstration completely perfectly, but I didn't feel that was really the point. The idea is we're experimenting with these sounds, so if you do want to add in any passing tones here or there, you don't have to be too strict with yourself. It's also a good idea if you find a wrong note, a note that you think doesn't sound nice, the temptation is to try and resolve it as quickly as possible. Maybe sit on that wrong note and repeat it and come back to it over and over again. See if you can figure out a clever way to get that wrong note to start to sound right to you. Now bear in mind, some of these are going to sound better to you than they do to me, and some of them are going to sound better to me than they do to you. It's very much taste-based. However, these scales are going to, with a bit of time, you're going to start to learn how to use them nicely. Now you may never end up using them in a live show, you may decide they're not the right sound for you, but they're going to inform your understanding of tension and release so that when you're playing tonally, you may want to add a passing note here or there, and as we discussed before, you're going to know exactly which degree of the scale to add. So in this video, I'm exclusively going to be looking at the C major 7 chord. There's so many options in this chord alone that we'd be here all day if we tried to look at every single chord. If there are any specific chords you would like me to do in future videos, please comment them down below. If we see a C major 7 chord, our obvious go-to scale is a C major 7. We know that scale is going to sound nice. Now another obvious option when we're playing modally would be to use a Lydian scale. There's only one note difference, so it's very easy to get away with this note. It's the sharp 4. You could consider it to be a flat 5 in the context, which we call a blues note. So the Lydian scale sounds like this. So our first hybrid scale is going to be the major and the Lydian. We're going to have both fourths, the natural fourth and the sharp 4. Let's hear how that sounds over a major vamp. Now the third scale we're going to use today, we know that a very common scale over a major chord, especially in bebop, is the major bebop scale. The only extra note in the bebop scale is an additional flattened sixth. So we end up with an 8-note scale just with the bebop scale. Now if we combine all three of these scales together, we've got the natural 4, the sharp 4 and the flat 6. Let's hear how that sounds. So in this hybrid scale, the nice notes, the juicy stuff, is between the major third, we've then got the fourth, the sharp 4, flattened sixth. So we've got this string of chromaticism. Lovely sounds in there. So that's the juicy stuff, that's the money in there. Now, when we look at this full hybrid scale, within it we notice a few other familiar scales. Now, in no particular order, the first one we've noticed here is the C Lydian Augmented. Don't panic about the Lydian Augmented title. This is the third mode of the melodic minor. If you're a long-time viewer, you know I bang on about the major scale, the harmonic minor scale, and the melodic minor scale. So, long-time viewers, you should be very confident with your melodic minor scale. You simply start on note 3. In this instance, that's going to be A melodic minor. Another familiar scale that lives within this hybrid scale is our D blues scale. Now, I found this one surprisingly difficult to use actually. I found both of the blues scales, we've got two that live in this, I found them both quite tricky to use. So let's hear how that fits in the context. Our second blues scale here is the B blues scale that is built only from the notes of our major, Lydian and major bebop scale. So another scale that exists within our three-scale hybrid is the harmonic major. Now, the word harmonic refers to the flattened sixth note. So harmonic major and harmonic minor both have a flattened sixth degree. The major and minor part of the scale name refers to the third degree. So the harmonic minor has a flattened third and the harmonic major has a major third, but they both share a flattened sixth. That sounds like this. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of other scales hidden inside our major, Lydian and bebop scale hybrid. However, the last one that we're going to look at today is the Ionian sharp 5, which is the third mode of the harmonic minor scale. Let me know down below in the comments if you can see any other scales that I've missed. I'd love to check those ones out. So you've started to see by now that some of these scales work better than others, but I'm able to play, I feel quite confident playing with most of these. Like I say, I found the blues scales particularly challenging, which is surprising as a guitarist. But I feel relatively confident using these because they're shapes that I recognise. Now, that's not to say that every single note that I play, I think, wow, that was amazing. Some of them are a little bit jarring, but of course, by getting comfortable with these, more comfortable by playing them more frequently, I'm going to start to know exactly where I can place those slightly tense notes. Now, these next four scales are what I'm calling partial scales. What I've done here is I've looked at the hybrid scale and I've found scales that most of the notes live within our hybrid. The notes you'll see in brackets are notes that weren't in my hybrid scale, but I'm just trying them out. I'm adding it in to see how it sounds. So in this first example, although there's no B flat in our original hybrid scale, I noticed that the rest of the whole tone scale was present. So I thought, well, we've got 5 out of 6, may as well shove that 6th note in there as well and get used to how that sounds. Let's have a listen. To create a C diminished scale, I only needed to add an E flat to our hybrid scale. Now, E flat is not a particularly unusual note to add anyway. It's not uncommon in a major scale to add a flat 3 as a kind of passing note between the second and the third. We wouldn't listen to that and think, oh, that's very dissonant. So it was no big deal to add this note in, and very difficult one to use, I found, the chromatic scale, but it is a sound I'm relatively familiar with, so I don't think it would take me too long if I really focused on this exercise to start to create some ideas which I felt really pleased with. The third partial scale that we've got here is I noticed we nearly had the F melodic minor scale, but we had a B natural instead of a B flat. So instead, I've added a B flat to my scale, and I'm getting used to how that sounds. So because this is the fifth mode, we're calling this the Lydian flat 6. Now the final scale we've got here, I almost saw the full scale, but it was missing, again, a B flat. And that is a scale which I once upon a time thought I had invented. It's called the Symmetrical Major. Later to find out that unfortunately I'd been beaten to it by Messiaen. So Messiaen's scale is the first 4 notes of the major scale, starting on C. And then we go up a semitone and play the first 4 notes of the major scale, starting on F sharp. It's the whole tone scale with 2 passing notes. Now the way I thought I'd invented this is because I noticed that the diminished scale is the first 4 notes of a minor, then up a semitone, and then the first 4 notes of a minor. So I thought, oh, I'm very clever here. I'm going to, instead of using a minor, I'm going to use a major. Like I say, Messiaen beat me to it. Let's hear how that one sounds. No doubt, like me, you had some mixed success. I feel I played some really lovely stuff, and I also played some pretty dodgy stuff as well. I'm sure you'll have a similar result. I think the secret here is just the consistency. Revisiting these sounds little and often over different tonalities. And it doesn't really matter which chord you're doing and which scale you're doing. The important thing is you're trying to push the boundaries. And by doing so, that has a knock-on effect through every scale and every chord. We just so happen to do major today. But like I say, please do comment down below if you'd like a similar lesson on a different chord type. So I think we've really proven that how we play a phrase is essential. I've tried my best in the demos today to try and be in the zone when I was playing. It's really difficult to hear a weird sound come out your instrument and not snap out of the zone. I'd be lying if I said I was, completely zen the whole time. I do hear these wrong notes when I'm playing, and it does occasionally snap me out of it. But the Kenny Werner approach is to try and reduce that as much as possible. He refers to, yes, that might be a horrible sound out of your instrument, but if you bought a new fridge and you bashed your fridge and it made that noise, you'd be calling all your friends and saying, you've got to hear how my fridge sounds, man. Because really, an instrument isn't capable of making an unpleasant sound. It's just an unfamiliar sound. Remember that these approaches are just for the practice room. See if you can play 1 bar of a wrong scale and try and make it sound nice. Then work on trying to play 2 bars and 4 bars. It's very unlikely you would ever need to play 64 bars of the wrong scale over a certain chord. But you can imagine that if you were able to do that, you're able to add 1 bar in here or there in a deeply moving and deeply profound way that's going to really resonate with people, especially when that's the tension and the release is returning back to the tonally correct sound. And finally, remember the point of this is it's an ear training exercise. This is not something you should be thinking about when you play live. You should not be there going, I'm now going to use the diminished scale over this major scale because it's what I've been practicing. However, if it is something you've been practicing, you might find that you do it anyway. You may find you never do it. It might be the only thing you practice for the rest of your life, and yet in a live situation, you never do it. That's equally fine. I hope you found that lesson helpful today, guys. Please do interact down below, like and subscribe. My channel has been doing very nicely recently. If you can spam my channel as much as possible, I would really appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers.